All right, so welcome to the second Q&A webinar for the Real Happiness Meditation Challenge. I'm Lily, and I work with Sharon and run this challenge for her every year. And of course, this year, all of it is happening virtually. So it's just nice to come together and in a virtual space to kind of cross the divide, since we're really from all over the world for this particular year. And so the flow of how this evening is going to move is we're going to start with a guided meditation from Sharon, and then I'll be asking questions to Sharon and kind of moderating questions that have been emailed. If you have not sent in a question and you have one, the way to do that in Zoom is to use the Q&A option. We're going to be closing down the chat itself. And if we have more questions than there's time for, then we're going to keep track of them. And either, we're a little undecided, we're either going to send you written responses from Sharon for your questions, or we may just record another, not a live Zoom, but an audio session of Sharon answering questions to make available. So it'll be one or the other, but definitely ask the questions that you have, and we'll find out the best way to answer them, whether it's here or in other formats. So having said that, I'll pass it over to you, Sharon, so you can start things off.
Hi, thank you for everything, Lily, and thank you all for coming. I'm tuning in from Barre, Massachusetts. The Insight Meditation Society is just through the forest in that direction. Joseph Goldstein is on retreat just a few yards away in that direction. And earlier, before it got dark, which was actually quite some time ago, Lily said, "Where are you? It looks like it's midnight." And I said, "Well, no, it always looks like that here." But before then, I was watching the snowfall, so I'm assuming it's still falling. And we have been looking at your questions. We'll get to as many tonight as we can, and one way or another, be able to respond to the rest. So why don't we begin with the sitting? Just for a few minutes to more fully arrive. You can close your eyes or not, however you feel most at ease. See if your posture could be straight, but not like stiff. And find that place where you feel like you're in balance. You can start by listening to sound, whether it's the sound of my voice or other sounds. It's a way of having a sense of space, relaxing deep inside, allowing experience to come and go. And of course, we like certain sounds and we don't like others. But we don't have to chase after them, to hold on or push away. Just let the sound wash through you. And bring your attention to the feeling of your body sitting. You can feel the earth supporting you. Feel space touching you. Usually we think of touching space and it's very active, like poking our finger in the air. But space is already touching us. We just need to receive it. Bring your attention to your hands and see if you can make the shift from the more conceptual level, like fingers, to the world of direct sensation, picking up pulsing, throbbing, pressure, whatever it might be. You don't have to name these things, but feel them. And bring your attention to the feeling of your breath, just the normal, natural breath, wherever you feel it most distinctly, nostrils, chest, or abdomen. You can find that place, bring your attention there, and just rest. See if you can feel one breath. And if the breath doesn't serve you as this kind of home base, use some other sensation in your body, just a place to rest your attention. And as images and sounds and sensations arise and pass away, these too you can allow to come and go. You don't have to follow after them, you don't have to fight them. It's simply breathing. And if you find you've just been gone, completely lost, wrapped up in a fantasy, or you fall asleep, truly don't worry about it. Once you realize you've been distracted, see if you can gently let go and just bring your attention back to the feeling of the breath or whatever object you are resting your attention on. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end the meditation.
Thank you, Sharon. So one thing that I didn't mention earlier, which might be helpful for some people, is you are able to ask anonymous questions as part of this, if that's something that's more comfortable for you. And the first thing is that I've gotten several people asking, seems like a good place to start. Do guided meditations count? Are they real meditation? Is it cheating? Any comments you have on that?
I think they count. I don't think it's cheating. I do have a kind of personal bias, which I've expressed, a lot, which is that I think people should do whatever form of meditation and with whatever aids are going to help them. That's fine. But to spend like just a little bit of time with kind of like nothing extra, just because one of my desires in teaching meditation is that people will be able to pick up some tools they can take with them anywhere. Like they're commuting and maybe they can't find the app for the guided meditation, or they're at work and they can't start running around the room. People say, I get my best meditation when I'm running or whatever, but you can't actually logically do that, And so what do we have? We have the body, we have the mind, we have the breath. And I think it would be good to spend even a small amount of the time just using that, kind of bare bones, nothing extra, no equipment, so that you feel confident in taking it with you wherever you go. And if the rest of the time you want to listen to guidance, I think that's great. Some people cannot stand guided meditations, so it's a very personal thing.
Just as a reminder to folks, several questions have come in about what happens at the end of the month, and all participants will have access to the challenge materials until the end of April. So you have a lot of time left with them. And after that, the recordings themselves, the audio recordings, are available through Happify. But we don't, because Happify owns the recordings, we don't sell these exact recordings or have them available in other means. So just to answer that, instead of making you answer it, Sharon. So we've had a few questions really around dealing with challenging emotions from this past week, and a few different kind of angles on similar questions. One is just that when someone's doing the meditation, bringing up a difficult emotion, it's really staying with them for the rest of the day. And they're wondering just how to deal with that. Is that correct? Or are they doing something incorrect? Any thoughts you have on that?
I don't think you're doing anything incorrectly. I think that it's fine. It's not easy, and therefore I'm trying to think of a way of having a stronger sense of closure at the end of the meditation or before the end. Actually combining it, we bring up difficult emotions so that we're less afraid of them and we can be with them in a kinder, more compassionate way. And that extends then to compassion for others. And, so I would like emphasize the compassion part and maybe do a little loving kindness instead of jumping ahead, but why not? Bring in some loving kindness or combine it with meditation on looking for joy, looking for even small pleasures that you can also just to create a different kind of balance at the end. And I would even at the end of the session, do a kind of dedication, which is also jumping ahead, but sort of offer the fruits of your meditation to others so that you have a feeling that you're connected to a bigger world. And that would also be a good thing to experiment with.
There's a similar question, which is why do we seem to go directly to negative feelings, emotions, or thoughts almost as automatic default?
As human beings, I guess people say, evolutionary biologists say we're wired there. I don't know that we actually go directly to a direct observation and realization of painful feeling. I think many of us have just societal, cultural, family conditioning of like, look anywhere else, don't look there. And so in terms of meditation, it's actually a choice, I mean, not always, of course, things arise and pass away on their own, but when difficult or painful state arises, we make the choice to kind of go there, to turn our attention around, to look at it plainly, and see if we can avoid adding isolation and condemnation and shame and all of those other things, and just realize, okay, this is what's happening right now. But in order to do that, we do need a certain measure of self-compassion. It's not that easy to just look at painful states. And so that also is a kind of personal question, like what helps me build the kind of openness and flexibility and kindness so that I can look at all this stuff, and it will be somewhat different for different people. For some people it will be a kind of loving kindness aspect to their practice, which would be important to bring in. And for some people, the balance is going to be in allowing the beautiful or the good, even for a moment, to occupy our attention, because we don't actually go there necessarily to the painful states to look at them clearly. It tends to be a more distorted relationship. We go there, evolutionary biologists say, first, because we are trained to do that in the jungle. It's like we're wired for danger, for threat. It takes a kind of conscious effort to say, well, what's good today? But that might be an important thing to do as well.
And what about when, in this same type of meditation, it kind of crosses over into remembering past traumas and that it's really activating in kind of a different realm?
I think it depends on what you mean by remembering, because the question is really, how are we relating to the feeling, to the visualization, whatever may be coming up? And if it feels like we are kind of sucked in, that's activation. If it's present and we are present with it in a more open way, kinder way, then that's healing. So it's some real self-evaluation, not of what's happening, not of what's arising or even its intensity, but how we are able to relate to it. In other words, what's the environment we are creating around that experience? And is it helpful or not? And sometimes we just don't have it, we haven't slept, or we've got a lot going on. We're just tired anyway, and we don't have the sheer energy it would take to be with such difficult material in a different way. But it's that difference that's really the point. And that's one way or another, with maybe several approaches or whatever it might be. That's the place we grow to come to, which is where we are very different in response to anything that may arise. And so there's a kind of freedom there.
Here's a question from Judith. When anger hits me, it hits like a flash, and sometimes it's over like a flash as well. I don't feel like I have time to engage in it or deconstruct it. How can I deal with anger that rises so quickly and also sometimes ends quickly? Is it rather like a pressure cooking, letting off steam, and once the steam is released, the anger dissolves?
Just before I get to that, I want to go back for a moment and to the previous question and just remind people of, stuff we've talked about before, which is that balance looks different for each of us at different times because of all kinds of different factors, including whether we slept last night, and balance looks different between people at different times. And so if we're talking about a balanced relationship to very difficult emotions, for example, sometimes that's going to mean like taking a breath, reminding yourself you're okay, reminding yourself you're an adult, whatever it is, and looking more directly at what's happening. Sometimes balance looks like take a walk, for God's sake, like go look at the sky, and it's not like right or wrong. It's really hard and really important to understand that the goal is the balance, and we just do different things at different times to help deepen that. And the same holds true for looking at anger. I'm not totally sure if you're saying you feel these flashes of anger, which are like a storm moving through your body, or you yell and are quickly over it, or you send that email and then you think, well, maybe I was a little angry, and those are very different. The gap we're actually looking for at first is between what we feel and how we act. Which also makes us, I think, less afraid of our feelings, the anger, the desire, whatever it might be, because we don't have that extra kind of concern like, oh, am I going to like ruin this relationship, or am I going to grab that meditation shawl when no one's looking, or whatever. It's like we feel, okay, I can look at all these things with that sort of boundary that I've agreed to, that I've taken on in terms of my own behavior. And that's really helpful because then we can look at all those feelings and it's in a different way, and we can come closer to them without feeling like, oh, this always takes me over. This is going to take me over, because we've learned how not to have that happen. So I think those are actually two different questions. If you're saying you're quickly angry and then you get over it, it just passes in the expression of it, then I think it depends on your particular relationships and the agreements that you have with one another. And is that okay? Is it okay if you apologize? Is it okay if you say what you maybe had meant to say but wasn't coming through so clearly, perhaps, because of the feeling? The main part of feeling anger in the meditation, like the feeling, is like it can be like a storm moving through. You don't have to take it apart. You don't have to deconstruct it. You don't have to see what other emotions are there. You just have to watch that process. Because that shows us something too. It shows us, however powerful it is impermanent, that we don't seem to have the kind of control, nobody does, over our minds where we can say that's not going to happen anymore and have that come true. But we can be different. And what happens in that process when it can pass through you like a storm is that you do have a chance to capture the energy of it, because you're no longer in the grip of like the delusion or the burning, but you can actually take the energy of it and decide to do something about some situation. So, we try to come closer to the feeling before the action as much as possible.
Thank you. So we also had a number of questions coming in around the meditation on positive emotions. And a number of them where participants are expressing that they don't feel like they deserve good feelings, or that they'll come with a cost, or that one person asked about the book Optimism Bias, and that like being optimistic can actually make us ignore deeper issues. So I was wondering if you could just speak to all of that a little bit.
I understand the problem. I think it actually is a problem. And I think so much of the time in my experience in meditation and early years of study and teaching, kind of the main challenge really was to open to suffering, with emphasis on the opening to not add those things that we tend to add, which take up a lot of space. Sense of isolation, sense of guilt. I brought this on, all kinds of things. It's only me. I'm all alone. It's only going to be this forever. And we work hard, I think, at developing a more spacious, kinder, more compassionate relationship. And a little later on, I've noticed, in one's years of practice, sometimes it can be a shift, and you face the challenge of really letting in the good, the beautiful, the wonderful, which is also a challenge. It's not the same challenge because we tend to have different conditioning, but not all that conditioning is that wholesome. We may feel something pleasant or wonderful and grab it. We're so afraid it will ever leave us. And that doesn't work. It just adds tension to the situation, whatever it is. Or maybe we have these strange standards of perfectionism, like nothing is ever good enough. Or maybe we have that pattern, I don't deserve it, or there's too much pain in this world. I can't let this in, or this is so superficial, or whatever. But it's almost like the science of resilience and the science of restoration. It's like any one of us should be looking at how we ourselves tend to cultivate resilience, and whether we're actually doing those very things. I think people are generally exhausted right now, and this has been a long, long, long ordeal and sorrow and so many things that are difficult, and it makes it even odder to think about taking in the joy. But for us to get out of bed and to try to have a better life or make a better world for others, whether it's our family or community or whatever, we need some energy, and we have to look at where that comes from. Not that it will be at the same, level every single moment. It won't, but we have to learn restoration. We have to learn renewal. We have to learn resilience. And some of that is very personal looking back. I think in every program where I've talked about this, people have talked about like listening to music or something. Certainly for me, meditation has been a big part of that, and taking in the joy, simple joys. Like, it wasn't that joyful looking at the snowfall, but it was pretty, and looking at the sky or just a small thing, and look at how it affects you, and understand that that's not selfish. That's actually building a kind of reservoir.
So following up with that, here's a question from Beth. When I'm sitting in meditation, strong emotion doesn't tend to arise, but I wake up in the night with unprocessed emotion. Can you speak a little bit to this pattern and why it might be happening?
In the long view, everything happens, and so sometimes meditation is one way, sometimes it's another way. It's all fine, truly. You don't have to think about catharsis and as the only valuable meditation or anything. Whatever it feels like is fine, and it's always challenging. If the feeling tone is kind of medium or neutral, then we have the challenge of really trying to connect in the moment, because it's not stimulating enough to sort of draw us in. We have to really be present. There's always some kind of challenge, and that's fine. I would say you can also expand your view of what meditation is. It's like if you wake up in the night, you're awake. You don't have to sit up in bed or get out of bed. You can lie there in any posture and just pay attention. Pay attention to the interplay of your body and mind. You know, you get a certain sensation, it produces an emotion, or the other way around, and you watch things go back and forth, and um, have that sense as much as possible as emotions being like weather patterns moving through your body. You know, sometimes intense, sometimes milder, but it's just moving through. Do some loving kindness for yourself, and see what that produces. Do some loving kindness for the world. There's something about lying in bed, or those hours where there just is a greater sense, I find, of kind of unmediated space. You know, you feel more like your loving kindness for all beings is moving, and so that's the time to really apply those tools.
Here's a question from Kathy. I experience an emotion frequently that I've not heard Sharon mention in these lessons: guilt. I feel guilty about everything: not making my bed, not brushing my teeth, not sticking to a diet, not calling a friend. These are just simple daily tasks, and the guilt is so ingrained that I don't even know I'm doing it. Self-sabotage. It leads to a constant feeling of I'm not okay. Can you talk about guilt?
The way it's usually talked about in, say, the Buddhist psychology is, it's kind of a fine use of language, you know, and that is to see guilt as a state that's distinct from remorse or regret. So when all these mental states are looked at, or emotions, you could say, are looked at, um, the grid, the analysis is what leads to suffering and what leads to less suffering. Um, and so the terminology would be that which is skillful leads to less suffering, leads to more happiness, more connection, more wisdom. And that which is unskillful is that which leads to more suffering for ourselves or others. And so in that analysis, remorse or regret are considered skillful and guilt is considered unskillful. And this is the difference, you know. This is a very beautiful statement from the Buddhas that said, when he said, if you truly loved yourself, you'd never harm another. If you truly loved yourself, you'd never harm another, because you see that harming another is like harming yourself. And sometimes when we remember times we've spoken, you know, harshly, or we did something and it really broke the harmony of a group or something, we feel the pain of that. We feel the lack of self-love that came with. We feel um, remorse, like I wish I had seen things more clearly then. This is, you know, we feel the pain of it, and we are able to let go and move on with a determination, like lessons learned. I'm going to try to be better in the future. And also an appreciation that no one is perfect, but there's that kind of effort, the reconstituting of effort. Like, yeah, I really blew it then. I'm, you know, now I see that it leaves a residue even all this time later. I'm going to try to be better. So in effect, we forgive ourselves and we can move on. Whereas guilt is like staying stuck there. It's not just an action or a behavior. It's more like essential to our being, like I am bad, I am lazy, I am whatever. And we just go over it and over it and over it. And we don't have that same sense of like, okay, lessons learned. That was not a great thing to do. I'm going to try harder in the future. We just can't go on. We're stuck. And so it's not healthy. It's not considered skillful. It's not onward leading. It's not going to give us the energy to be better. And so the first thing we try to do, you know, that's the guidance, is see if you can feel the difference. And remember that the remorse doesn't feel good, but it is a good state, because we're also not super identified, like I am just that idiot who did that thing. It's like that was a mistake, or that was an action that wasn't so helpful. So see if you can feel the difference. And if you're more in the guilt terrain, that too is the time, first of all, seeing it clearly will help. And understanding that it's just conditioning. It doesn't mean that you're lazy to not have the guilt, because you can have the recognition like, oh, that was not a great thing to do. But you have the ability to go on. And this is really very, very important. And some loving kindness for yourself is really at the root of that.
Here's a question about anxiety from Susan. With health anxiety, I find it extremely difficult to cope. I get the slightest symptom and then it turns into a full-blown panic that is something terrible. How can mindfulness help me with this ongoing problem?
Well, it's not an uncommon problem. I mean, especially in these days. Um, you know, Psychologically, I guess we'd call that catastrophizing. And here I refer to my friend, my colleague Sylvia Borstein, who describes herself as a recovering catastrophizer. The idea, again, is that we're not going to be able to stop certain patterns from emerging or certain thoughts from arising. The question is cultivating the strength, the dexterity, the presence, the balance, the kindness to be with those thoughts in a different way so that they don't just take you away, they don't drag you into action. They don't leave you suffering, for a good long time. And so don't despair if those thoughts still come. Everything here too is going to depend on how we relate to them. So Sylvia got into meditation practice because she was suffering so much from kind of anxious rumination. So she would describe herself this way. She's 82 or 83 or something like that. So her children are adults. And she said, I'm the kind of person who would call my grown child and they don't answer the phone. So they must be dead. She said, I never think they're taking a shower or that maybe they fell in love. They don't feel like talking to their mother. It's like they must be dead. And she was so haunted by that kind of thinking. I'm sure it was very hard on her family. That's how she got into meditation, many years ago. And I think what happened is really that those thoughts would come. She would see them much more quickly for what they were. She'd have a way to kind of reground. I mean, people, like what I say to myself with that kind of anxiety is, you don't know. You've already diagnosed yourself and sent yourself to a facility for the rest of your life, but you don't know, right? And that helps. Just something. It could be a grounding exercise, just the kinds of things people do, like look for what you're seeing, look for what you're hearing, look for what you're feeling, anything that you learn. And you will find that there is a kind of kindness that comes and that you extend it to others. You see people, having terrible experiences of anxiety, and it's sort of like sometimes I say to myself, you can go through this 3 times or you can go through it once. If the worst happens, you can go through it, like live through it, in horrified anticipation. You can go through it when it actually happens, and you can go through it because you're stuck. But we don't need to do that. And there's so much more joy and kind of lightness of being that can come even with that habit, still somewhat prevalent.
Thank you. So here's a question from Catherine. My question relates to how to embrace a transition, even one that you're dreading. My maternity leave is ending soon, and although I'm trying to embrace the idea that every ending is a new beginning, I still feel very sad. How can I honor these feelings while remaining present in my last days of this leave? I want to model this for myself and my young child. Thank you so much.
I think it's both. I don't think, it reminds me in a present moment kind of way of what I sometimes quote Roshi Joan Halifax. When I wrote a book called Real Love, which was 2 books ago, um, I was quite late turning in the manuscript, and then I turned it in, and I got an away message from my publisher, like they're on vacation. And I thought, well, great, I could have had another 2 weeks, but I didn't. And when my publisher wrote to me, finally, he said, I really liked the book, and the part I liked the most was the when you quoted Roshi Joan Halifax saying something like, "We shouldn't try to force ourselves to see the traumas of our past as gifts; they're givens." And my first thought was, well, first of all, the part of my book he likes the most I didn't even write. Roshi Joan Halifax wrote it, but I actually agreed with him because it's a very important lesson. There can be a lot of pressure to feel I have to be grateful for this, and I have to think of it as a gift, and I have to, and that's just unreal in many cases, and that's not the point. Is to just get into some superimposed state that we think we should be feeling or not feeling. We are feeling it, and so it's a given. It's true. So I would hopefully, want that to relieve you of a big burden right away. You don't have to be grateful for it, and of course you're sad. Um, but when that gets enveloping, when that takes over, and it can, the anticipation of something coming to an end is often the reason we don't enjoy the end, because we have been for sometimes a long time so caught up in what's coming next. Um, so you want to be able to enjoy every moment. You want to be able to accept, yes, this is a given, this is the truth of things, and enter the unknown, recognizing that it's unknown. I'm trying to think if it was Lily or someone else in my life when I was uh, subletting an apartment in New York City, and I was losing it for some reason. And I had to find another apartment, and I felt really bad about it. And whoever it was said, well, maybe you like the next apartment more. And I thought, it never occurred to me, not for a moment. So I thought, oh, okay, maybe it'll be even better. Who thought that? So it's all 3 things. It's like honoring what you're feeling, enjoying what is right now, and recognizing, yeah, this is the truth, it's going to change, and then seeing you don't know what's coming next.
Thank you. So we've had a couple questions coming in the kind of specific to relationship that I thought we could talk about now, and then we'll move into a lot of questions about loving kindness. So there have been a number of questions just about kind of what are the general benefits of meditation in relationship, but in particular, like in partnership or intimate relationship, and also the loss of relationship, and a number of questions about people who, whose relationships look very different, in particular right now because of the pandemic.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's, easy to extrapolate. In general, it'll be very personal, but in general, you can kind of tell. There's the ability to listen better. Everything we do internally translates externally. The ability to listen more, that helps. Noticing what we're adding on. Somebody, a partner, let's say, pays, starts telling a story, and you think, I know the ending of the story. Why are they telling the story? But maybe we realize that. And we can say, well, let me just listen. Let me actually get here. Once we see we're distracted, we've cultivated the ability to gently let go and come back. We apply that all the time in order to be more present and to make for new beginnings, because that's a part of things. What am I letting go of? What am I moving on to? Um, and being aware of that. So I really think everything we do internally gets manifested externally, and we can bring that awareness very consciously. Usually when we talk about being mindful throughout the day, the easiest thing to be aware of is one's body, the feeling of your feet against the floor, or your hands touching, or your breath, something like that. And so very often we just get in the habit of using those means in order to uh, almost be more aware during a conversation, during a gathering, during a meeting, whatever it might be, because it allows us to just notice. And in all the same ways, we have to begin again and again and again. We have to do it here too. And to be much more in touch with what you're feeling actually, and then have enough space around that feeling to have a choice. Like, do I want to say it this way or that way? Um, Something like that. And they're all just like important skills in life. And that's ultimately why we actually practice them in meditation. And the loss of a relationship it's a very profound loss. I think maybe last time we were together, I quoted something that I quote in Real Change, which is that grief is love that doesn't have the normal place to land. The person, the dynamic, the situation, the ideal, the expectation, the place, something is gone. And something that can be very helpful is looking back and recognizing, well, there's love at the core of that. Um, Even though it's not the same, that love is still very alive and uh, nourishing kind of thing. And so here too, we practice just like moving our attention and admit what we don't know. Um, Here, with many of these situations, um, it's tough because we live in a society that is not necessarily providing a lot of help, a lot of tools, a lot of skills, a lot of understanding of just the universality of suffering and change and so on. So we have that to counter as well. The way family relates to us, the way friends relate to us, expectations, things like that. But it's very possible, I think, to um, just create a very different sense of what one feels, and knowing that it's okay to feel it.
Thank you. So we have a number of questions coming in around loving kindness and compassion, and we'll start here. Question from Amada. I wonder if you've ever used this metta type of meditation with 12-step program approach, something like, may I have serenity in my life, may I be courageous, may wisdom be present in all my actions.
I think that's a beautiful set of phrases, and the major criteria for the phrases are they feel okay to you. They may not feel wonderful to you, but that's all right. They're words and it's difficult, but you need to not feel you're in struggle with them. And the other thing is that they be broad enough so that you can make that offering to yourself and then to others. Maybe not all others. There may be certain situations where very specific phrases kind of come along with a person, but mostly you don't want to be thinking all the time, what about you? What about you? So those are beautiful phrases.
And then we've had a few questions about loving kindness in the difficult or challenging category. Here's an anonymous question. Should we send loving kindness to those who stand for social and societal injustices? For example, those in groups like the KKK or those that incited the insurrection on the Capitol? If so, does sending loving kindness to these types of people get easier the more we practice? Thank you.
Well, certainly it gets easier the more we practice. One of the underlying principles of loving kindness practice, which speaks for the need for a lot of flexibility and creativity, is that it's meant to be done in the easiest way possible. And that's just something to keep reminding yourself of. So, for example, the sequence in the classical order of loving kindness, which you don't try to do in every single session, but you practice over time, is starting with the offering of loving kindness to yourself, then someone known as a benefactor, someone who's helped you or you admire, a friend, a neutral person, someone you don't especially like or dislike, a difficult person, which is what we're talking about, and then all beings everywhere and all of life. So that implies that we ourselves are supposed to be the easiest person of all to send loving kindness to because we're first in the classical order. So that is clearly not true for a whole lot of people, and sometimes untrue to the extent of a real struggle, in which case I always go back to the classical order and say, put yourself in later. Start with a benefactor. Start with what's easiest, and you can even have fun including yourself. Like people have said to me things like, I didn't offer myself loving kindness till I was offering loving kindness to all beings everywhere. And then I would like pop up like a pop-up ad in a computer and say, you too, me too, something like that. And you can have fun with it, but do pay attention to that. So when we get to the difficult person along the same lines, we're instructed not to start with like the most unthinkable person or people who have hurt us so badly or hurt others so badly, behaved so terribly in our view on the world stage that it's just not real. Again, it's not realistic. And remember also, loving kindness doesn't mean you adore somebody and you or even like them, but that you feel the sense of connection to them, that our lives are intertwined. But anyway, so they say start with somebody you feel like a little bit of a problem with. Because as we do it, we are putting in building blocks of kind of embodied wisdom to some very difficult questions. Like, what does it feel like to have loving kindness for someone and for myself? And what does it feel like to have loving kindness for someone and so dislike their actions that you think, I am going to do everything I can to try to stop them, but not from a place of hatred? Or what does it feel like to have loving kindness for someone and realize I can't fix it? I can't make it all better. And we sit right in that place, even if you don't have the words for it. You've kind of done it over and over again. You feel it, and then it's easier to offer loving kindness to a really difficult person. So understanding what loving kindness means and what it doesn't, putting the building blocks in place. And I'd also say it's a time often of a lot of flexibility. I have taught loving kindness on several occasions, both with a lot of personal trauma behind one and kind of global trauma or more collected trauma, where the phrase the person themselves came up with in offering loving kindness to someone else was, may you be free of hatred. And I thought, that's great. It is what they actually would wish for this person, also believing that the less pain we're in, the less pain we cause others. So I would play with it, but don't, first of all, these people wanted to do it. You don't have to think this is like obligatory or I'm not a good human being. But it also does free us. So then I'll just close with what I remind myself of, which is that they say the Buddha taught loving kindness meditation is the antidote to fear. So that's an interesting twist on it also.
And one follow-up question about practicalities of loving kindness practice. There's a question from Beth. Can you send loving kindness to a deceased person?
You can in a couple of different ways. It's a little tricky, partly because of Eastern belief systems about rebirth and Western belief systems about rebirth. Sometimes in the West, people offer loving kindness to a person who's deceased, and it's almost more like it's an honoring of their memory, and that's fine. That's a beautiful thing to do. In the East, where they do believe in rebirth, they actually believe this is an energy that can connect us beyond the body, beyond birth and death, beyond time and space. And so it's done kind of in that spirit. You can do it in the way we do loving kindness, or you can do it. There's a practice called sharing merit, which is like at the end of a sitting or the end of a contribution to something, or a phone call, reaching out, seeing if someone's lonely, some good deed. Then you just kind of feel the positive energy of that, and you offer it in the form of loving kindness to friends, to those who've helped you, often to those who've died, because it is a kind of living memorial, like your own good-heartedness in that way.
So we have a couple of short questions I think that we can fit in before we finish. We're getting a lot of questions about what does your practice look like, Sharon, and if you vacillate in between different types of meditation, how long you sit, when in the day you sit, all these things.
Well, again, we can divide meditation into two parts, you could say. One is a formal dedicated period of sitting or walking or lying down where 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, where your intention is just to try to deepen mindfulness and kindness and things like that. And then there's the whole range of activities that we call short moments many times, trying to drink the cup of tea and only drink the cup of tea, not also be checking your email at the same time. So you have a much deeper acquaintance with a cup of tea. You can feel the warmth of the teacup and smell the tea and taste the tea and all that. Don't pick up the phone on the first ring. Let it ring 3 times and breathe. Or, don't press send right after you wrote the email. Take a few breaths, read it again. Just like interject these moments or sprinkle these moments of mindfulness and loving kindness around. So my life looks really different than it did, year and a half ago. I'm not traveling all the time, and there's a lot more captured time. So certainly with the kind of short moments many times, leading into shorter sittings many times, like I got on to do a tech check here at 6:30, and we were done very quickly, and then I had time. So part of that time I spent just eyes closed, feeling my breath. And it's kind of wonderful just seeing 2 minutes here, 3 minutes here, 5 minutes there, what it does. I do have a sitting practice, kind of more formal, every morning, and that's between 20 and 40 minutes. I do both kind of mindfulness practice and a loving kindness practice. Although for a long time, my more formal or my clearest loving kindness practice was like walking down the streets of New York or in some activity, which you can also do. But now, that I'm not walking down the streets of New York, I'm sort of dividing sittings between techniques.
We actually had that question last time that we didn't get to, that Carolyn Welsh asked, is now that you're not walking down the streets of New York City, are you doing metta in other ways for people? So we also have had a lot of questions coming in about kind of what the suggestion is at the end of the month. And a lot of these I think are going to be answered in this week and in the final lessons. So stay tuned. There's plenty coming your way about that specifically. And I want to throw one more question at you in this session because it seems like a good revisiting from where we started, which is that we had the question come in, what is happiness?
Ooh. Well, since I've been in the position of having many of the book titles given to me with the word happiness, I've had to really answer that, for myself, very much so. So around the time of my book, Real Happiness, which was the title given to me by the publisher, I started defining happiness as a sense of inner resource, like not feeling depleted, not feeling just in battle with the world, just sense of inner resource, sometimes inner abundance, at least inner sufficiency. So there's something we can reach. It's not dependent on circumstance. Of course, we get happiness from lots of different circumstances, but they are very transitory. So a more enduring or sustaining kind of happiness, I think, is something else. So think about it. It's an interesting question.
Well, thank you for answering all of these. And for everyone who's listening and watching, this is going to remain available on Facebook, but also we're going to be posting it inside Teachable so you can revisit things later. And once we decide what to do with the unanswered questions, we'll either be in direct touch with those of you who've asked questions with a written answer, or we'll be putting out another recording with answers. So anything else you want to say before we close, Sharon?
No, thank you all for coming. And it's great. It's Loving Kindness Week. It's very exciting.
Loving Kindness Week. Well, thank you very much and have a wonderful evening, everyone.